All right, let's get right into it. We're going to break down a really critical plan for Europe's economy. And this is one that could directly impact your investments, your money. This isn't just some abstract political talk. This is about your wallet. Now listen to this quote. That is not a line from some angry commentator on TV. That's the stark warning that came from Mario Draghi, the guy who used to run the European Central Bank, and Emmanuel Macron, the president of France. They said this to every single leader in Europe. So right away you know the stakes are incredibly high.
And it's a fair question, right? You have savings, you have investments. Why on earth should you care about some high-level political meeting in a castle in Belgium? Well, because what they talked about isn't just theory. It's a plan that could seriously shake up the entire European market. And if you're an investor, you need to understand it.
To really get to the heart of this, we need to start with a surprisingly simple story. It's the story of a baker.
So this is Pierre. He's a brilliant baker in Paris. I mean, his baguettes are works of art. He decides he wants to move to Berlin, for love, and he dreams of opening his own little bakery there. After all, this is supposed to be the European single market, right? Free movement, easy to do business. Sounds simple enough?
Well, not so fast. Pierre gets to Germany and immediately hits a brick wall. See, in Germany, to open a bakery, you have to be a Bäckermeister, a master baker, with a very specific German certificate. And his top-of-the-line French qualification? It means absolutely nothing. He'd have to go back to school for years, spend thousands of euros. It's a non-starter. Now, get this. In the entire 30-year history of the so-called European single market, 30 years, how many French bakers do you think have actually managed to get their qualifications recognized in Germany without a massive, expensive legal fight? Just one. A single baker. In 3 decades? So Pierre's story isn't just about bureaucracy and croissants. It's a perfect little example of a massive, continent-wide failure. It is literally a trillion-euro problem, and it's all built on these kinds of invisible walls.
The International Monetary Fund actually did the math on this, and what they found is just absurd. All these internal barriers in Europe's service market, the friction between Paris and Berlin or Rome and Amsterdam, it's the equivalent of Europe slapping a 110% tariff on itself. We freak out about 15% tariffs from other countries while operating with this giant self-inflicted wound at home.
And look, we're not talking about some tiny corner of the economy here. This is the services industry. It makes up 3/4 of the entire European economy and provides 2/3 of all the jobs. The biggest, most important part of the economy is the one that's the most broken. So, what is the cost of all this madness? 1 trillion euros. That's a 1 with 12 zeros. That's how much economic potential Europe just throws away every single year, because the single market that we all think exists doesn't really. And now you see why Draghi and Macron are sounding the alarm. So this brings us back to the plan they cooked up in that Belgian castle. It's being called One Europe, One Market, and it's designed specifically to fix this trillion-euro problem. It's basically built on 3 big pillars. First, a ruthless attack on bureaucracy. Second, a fundamental redesign of the internal market itself. And third, and this is a big one, finally create a truly unified energy market. So let's break down what that actually means. Okay, this idea is probably the most revolutionary part of the whole plan. It's called the 28th regime. Imagine this, a single European company law. A startup could go online, register as a European company in 48 hours, and boom, they can immediately operate across all 27 countries under one single set of rules. And this slide just shows you how huge that is. Today, if you're a startup in Europe, you're facing a nightmare. 27 different legal systems, 27 different tax rates, insane costs just to stay compliant. With the 28th regime, one registration, one rulebook, launch in 2 days. That is how you start to actually compete with the US and China. Now, for that third pillar, energy. President Macron put it very bluntly. He basically said, look, Germany's industrial engine ran on cheap Russian gas. That's gone. Now huge chemical companies are cutting German jobs and moving their factories to places like China and the US. Why? Because the energy in Europe is just too expensive. And as he lays it out, that creates a direct chain reaction that ends with your investment portfolio going down. But, of course, a great plan on paper is one thing. Actually executing it is another. This road is absolutely full of political landmines and old rivalries that could just stop this whole thing dead in its tracks. And here is the core of the problem. You got the big industrial countries like Germany and Italy yelling at the EU Commission in Brussels, stop making so many darn rules. But then the Commission points the finger right back and says, hey, the real problem is you guys. You take our rules and then you gold plate them. You add your own layers of red tape. You're the ones who won't recognize Pierre the Baker's diploma.
But it wasn't all fighting. Amidst all that, they did manage to find common ground on 4 concrete points. First, they have to unlock the trillions of euros sitting in European savings accounts and get it invested. Second, they have to do something about high energy costs. Third, they need to go find new trade partners. And fourth, and this is really important, they agreed to create a Buy European preference for strategic industries like cars, pharmaceuticals, and defense.
So the big question is, what does all of this mean for you, the investor? Let's distill it all down into 4 clear, actionable takeaways. First, keep a really close eye on the European Council. If they formally approve this plan and put some real deadlines on it, that's a massive green light for European stocks. And you'll want to pay special attention to those sectors that are going to be protected by that new Buy European policy. Second, watch for something called the Savings Union. This, honestly, could be the biggest game changer of all. The idea is to make it easy for the trillions of euros Europeans have just sitting in low-yield bank accounts to get invested in businesses across the continent. If they can unlock even a fraction of that dormant cash, it could trigger a huge reevaluation of the entire European market. Third, never, ever take your eye off energy costs in Europe. It is the continent's Achilles heel. As long as energy costs several times what it does in the US, European industry is fighting with one hand tied behind its back. Any real progress on a unified energy market is a huge win for all of European industry. And finally, do not underestimate the 28th regime. If it truly becomes possible for a tech startup to launch across the entire EU in 48 hours, we could be watching the birth of a genuine European tech ecosystem. The talent has always been there. This plan could finally give that talent the giant single market it needs to flourish.
You know, the world is not standing still. China isn't waiting, the US isn't waiting, and there is €1 trillion of potential sitting on the table every single year. So the question that Macron posed to Europe is really the same one you should ask about your own portfolio. Are you going to be a spectator, or are you going to be a participant?